With Greg Katz, this is Erik McKinney, and Greg, let's wrap up, kind of put a bow on week 2 of spring ball, and USC 6 practices down. Had the first kind of semi-scrimmage on Saturday with some kind of game-like situations, and we'll get into kind of the big topics of it. And right off the bat, let's start with that offensive line. It was the biggest question for you, the biggest question for me, the biggest question kind of for everybody coming into it. Now, 2 weeks in, what we've seen is Cortland Ford at left tackle every single practice. And the rest of that first unit is what came back from last year. And again, rattling them off left to right. Cortland Ford left tackle. Then you've got Andrew Voorhees at left guard, Brett Nealon there at center, Liam Jimmons at right guard, Jalen McKenzie at right tackle. Your thoughts on seeing that sort of over and over and over for the first 2 weeks now?
Well, I'm not surprised that that's what they have. Those are the most experienced linemen. So they're going to look at experience first for no other reason than to help Keaton Slovis out so that at least he can have confidence he has an experienced line in front of him. That being said, didn't we all have a little bit of fear saying, okay, if the line was last in rushing last season in the Pac-12, and this season they're not going to have Elijah Vera-Tucker, what should we expect? Well, the big shining object was Cortland Ford. Everyone is more concerned about, is he starting? Is he starting? It's almost like you forget the other 4 guys on the offensive line, but it's the same guys. And now you have an inexperienced left tackle. Now, that's not to say that Cortland Ford won't be a great player down the line. Okay. But this is what we're looking at right now. And so far, fair or unfair, the offensive line is not making a statement. Okay. And I'm going to assume that this is going to be the offensive line for the most part. I don't see how someone's going to beat out any of those guys just from an experience standpoint and from a cultural standpoint of not ruffling a lot of feathers. But the point is I think what they're really doing is they're looking for who's going to back up these guys. Okay. Can Justin Dedich play left guard as well as center if something happens to those guys? And we know that some of them have gone down already in their careers, like Voorhees. Okay, we know that. So the question is, are they going to be able to do what everyone says they need to do? Run the football and protect Slovis. Okay. I don't think they've proven it, but it's still early. We're only in the second week, but there are tendencies that are starting to show. I think most people would agree with that.
I think overall in these practices, they are absorbing the blows from the defensive line. That there's been kind of very few plays where you see them go out and push the defensive line around and kind of establish themselves. And that's something that going forward is absolutely, I think, worth watching to see if they can kind of, gain an edge a little bit on the defense. And I'm a little bit surprised. What you said about this being the starting lineup, I'm right. If I had to bet right now, yes, these are the first 5 going out there against San Jose State. Sure. I thought that we'd see more kind of mixing and matching inside of practices. Hey, let's send, this left side out with maybe a Casey Collier and Justin Dedich going with the first team, right side and being able to see kind of those matches. And again, we're not there for every practice. We're not seeing everything that's going on, but certainly from the part where the media is able to be there, it has been the same. The only adjustment has been with that second group where Andrew Milek is going at center, Justin Dedich going in at left guard instead of playing center. And then on Saturday, we saw Jason Rodriguez fill in with the second team at right guard when Liam Douglas was out on the sideline. So it's been sort of really the only coaching decision in terms of shaking things up has been seeing that other second team center. And outside of that, it's been all the same. Now, Clay Helton did say going forward, you're going to see more guys flipping, the tackles flipping, guys going in and doing all the line there. So still a chance to kind of see guys in different positions and see if anybody can jump up into that kind of first group and establish themselves. But, I guess you can go either way with these first 2 weeks in terms of being surprised or not surprised. You certainly wanted to get a look at Cortland Ford with those returning guys because it made so much sense for him to be the guy that slides in, get as many answers as you can up there, and try to figure that out, how he works with them. Then you go forward from there. So again, that's going to be, I think everyone's going to kind of watch that again, just like coming in, great anticipation at how the offensive line kind of works its way. I think in terms of pass protection, it's been fine. The defense kind of gotten after him a little bit, and there have been sacks here and there for it, but ultimately okay. When the defense can't touch the quarterback, that obviously helps the offensive line. But in the run game, I think it's again few and far between, the big plays, and certainly not the consistency where you're giving the ball to the running back and he's 3, 4, 5 yards every carry. There have been way too many times where they're getting cut down in the backfield, and that's going to continue to be a question. Again, 2 weeks in, 3 more to go. You can still develop quite a bit, but at this point, that theme is kind of there. And when you go back to last year, even the year before, it's just it's been consistent. And so
there's footprints
go
there
ahead.
now. There's footprints. There's evidence.
Yes.
And some people were saying to me, "Well, you know what, Greg? Our defense is so aggressive, so extravagant. But you know what? The guys that are blocking them right now are the first unit from last year. And if they're having trouble, they shouldn't be having trouble at this point. They saw this defense last year in practice or what have you. I can understand the younger players, but if there's a problem running the football, they know what the defense is going to do. And it's a topic for really another conversation, but the air raid offense, does it really get the defense ready for a season, or does there's just a lot of complicated factors when you start playing other teams that are more, shall we say, balanced. So
and let's face it, the offensive line is going to be a topic for us next week. It'll probably be a topic the week after that, and then when we wrap up spring ball, it'll be another topic.
Amen to that, brother.
Going to the next one, I think the biggest sort of new piece of news from this past week, USC is going to be without Max Williams, kind of nickel safety there, and it's a blow, certainly for spring, where you're already playing without Greg Johnson, who started there for a bulk of last season. But boy, Max is a fun guy to watch. He brings a lot to a defense. He can do a lot for you in terms of coverage, in terms of playing against the run, and he coming off the edge, putting pressure on a quarterback on a blitz, which Todd Orlando loves to bring guys from the secondary there. So I guess thoughts overall, how big of a loss do you see this for USC? And then we'll get into right after that, what are they doing to kind of counteract it?
Well, when you consider that Greg, was injured, the starting nickel guy, he's injured. So you look at the next guy up, and then you start seeing, let's say, Max, right? And Max, I tell you, I felt bad for Max, really felt bad for him. It's the same knee that he injured at Sarah. And I'm going,
first game his senior year, and that knocked him out for his senior year in high school. And he rehabbed like crazy and was able to get back on the field as a freshman at USC. And he'll have to do it again. Nobody knows better than him kind of that road.
Well, he knows the drill. I guess that's the silver lining to it. But the pressure that it puts on SC to find out who can fill that spot. Theoretically, let's just take a worst case scenario. Suppose Greg Johnson can't come back. That he has complications somehow in his rehab, and you have no Max Williams until 2022. Now you're looking at some real inexperience. Now you're looking at, a conference that loves to pass the football. Now, I think we could all agree that, they're taking steps through recruiting a ton of defensive backs, and they're all, for the most part, perhaps based on reputation, more mature than your normal group of defensive backs, more physical. Beavers is one that comes to mind. His physicality and some others. But you know what? Experience does make a big difference. And losing Williams, and I'm going to say that Greg Johnson will be back, but will he really be back for the first couple of games? They really need for him to come back, in my opinion.
And what you've seen, talking about experience, that's kind of been where they've pivoted to, is on Saturday, Isaiah Pola-Mao goes in that spot. He shifts and he goes to that nickel safety spot. And I think that might end up being a pretty good fit for him. It's not exactly what Talanoa was doing last year, but it brings him closer to the line of scrimmage. He can get involved in the run game a little bit more and kind of move a little bit all over the place. And what that does is that lets you get Xavier Alford into that starting lineup. And we've seen Chase Williams back there too. And so those were the three starting safeties. And again, Greg Johnson coming back would be big, but I don't know if I'd bet against kind of that lineup being out there. I think Chase Williams has had a really good spring, and it does kind of, I think it raises a question on what does that starting secondary look like. I think you could go a lot of different ways. Britton Allen is the other guy who has gotten looks at that nickel spot, and he's done really well this spring too. He has kind of raised his game a little bit. I think that defensive secondary right now is a real strength for USC. You talked about the guys who came in. Alfred, obviously not a true freshman, but only 1 year of experience at Texas. And then the guys, you mentioned Anthony Beavers, but Kalen Bullock and Zamarian Gordon, they have all played extremely well. They look like upperclassmen, and they are physically put together in a way where it would not surprise me if they had to play this year. I think they would be able to. And so you've got a lot of moving pieces, and I think that's what this secondary allows you to do. Kind of the way Todd Orlando and Craig Nivar use the secondary lets you move guys around. And so when you lose a Max Williams and don't have Greg Johnson, you don't need a guy who plays exactly like Max to fill into that spot. You can kind of play to strengths and move guys around. So you hate it. You hate it for Max that he's got to come back for this. I think they're pretty well equipped to be able to handle the absence, and you just hope that he's able to get back to 100%. And at this point, you can't bet against him based on the fact that he's done it already. So again, best of luck to him kind of in his recovery. And I think SC's well positioned to keep moving forward at that spot.
Well, if you look at what happened in the scrimmage today, just from a secondary position, they have three interceptions. So whether the interceptions went through somebody's hands and somebody got a tip pass or somebody did something, that's still confidence builders for that position, because a guy like Craig Nivar or Dante Williams can say that's exactly what we're teaching you, and that's why you had the success you have. Even if the ball went through Jackson's hands, John Jackson's hands, you go, well, you know what, that happens in a game. But were you ready to catch the ball when it went through somebody's hands?
And Xavier Alford, a nice diving catch to bring it up before it hit the ground. I mean, the reaction to do that, not everybody would have been able to do that. And just to kind of put a bow, the interceptions on Saturday, Jaden Williams stepped in front of a kind of a quick pass and took it about 70 yards for an interception. And then Chase Williams, who I mentioned, he got an interception when Keaton Slovis kind of tried to throw sort of the width of the field down the field, and Chase Williams was able to get under it right before going out of bounds. So yeah, that secondary, I think, playing with a lot of confidence right now. And that leads into the next topic, which is Keaton Slovis. I think kind of 2 weeks in, we can take a look back and kind of see how he's played and where SC is with the quarterback right now. And I think the first week for me watching him, I came away feeling good about him, because at no point was I going, oh my gosh, what was that? Like we were a little bit in some of the early games last year where there were throws where you were questioning who he was throwing it, what uniform, color he was throwing it to, because it came out of his hand with so many problems that it just wasn't getting to where he wanted it to go. That was not the case in the first week. And so for me, the second week was watching, okay, now where are we going, right? Are we getting better? Are we improving? I think he's been okay. I don't think that he's necessarily looked like a guy coming back, as a 2-year starter, a junior quarterback, and a guy that a lot of people want to talk about as being a potential Heisman Trophy guy and a number 1 overall pick or a first round pick. I think that the talent's there, and you certainly see it, but in terms of coming out and just lighting up the defense and leading the offense all over the field, we haven't seen a lot of that. Kind of again, like the offense has been hit or miss a little bit, and some big plays sprinkled in with frankly times where the offense hasn't been able to move.
Well, they're not game planning for anybody. So, that works against him. Yeah, I mean, he's basically sitting back and throwing, and they're trying to run basic routes and that sort of things. I mean, the receivers are there for him. Drake Jackson, he's going to
Drake
be,
London.
excuse me, I'm getting that hang
Oh,
up like
there's all the Jacksons, there's all the Williams, there's the two Drake. I mean, the roster is just duplicate after duplicate.
I thought it was just my age creeping in. But no, with Drake London, he's going to be there. We know that. I'm assuming Brew McCoy comes back, he's going to be there. So it's really about the fall. My bigger issue with Keaton Slovis goes back to what we talked about the week before, and I see this when he throws interceptions, that can't, for whatever reason, help his confidence. I'm not saying it devastates him, but I think he's a little shaky. He was shaky by his own admittance before spring started. He says, I was emotionally wasn't all right, last season. And whether he was worried about his arm or whether he was worried about the pass rush, he was distracted. And to your point, he's going to do some things that look like Keaton, and then he's not going to do some things that look like Keaton. And you can say he looks okay, but he's not like he was as a freshman. Well, when you come as a freshman, you don't know any better. I mean, you've never been racked up by some of these defensive linemen that are coming at you. And all of a sudden it's kind of like, whoa, I could really get hurt here, And I don't know how he thinks the way he thinks, but it's going to play a part. And plus, he knows that offensive line. If we're talking about it, you don't think he's not talking about it in his head, even though he's not supposed to be tackled? Okay. So he's got a lot that he has to get right in order for him to be right. And we just don't know. It's almost like, what do they call it? Post-traumatic stress syndrome that he took last year, whatever they call it. It could be happening to him, even though he's not getting pounded in spring ball. But just the fact that he's not 100% confident, it can get into his head. He's gonna have to fight that.
Yeah, I think he's kind of a guy I'm definitely looking forward to now talking, going into week 3, week 4, week 5 to see if he can go to another level and kind of take control of that offense. Again, the idea where you're coming in thinking, what is this football going to look like coming out of his hand? Those questions, for me at least, are gone. He looks fine throwing the ball. Everything's coming out okay. It becomes, like you're saying, where you get into reads and really kind of starting to march the offense and take control of it and show up against this defense. Like you said, if you're getting sacked all the time, you don't have a running game there to support you, that's not always the easiest thing to do. And so with that, I think let's talk running backs. Now that we've had kind of a handful full tackle, full contact practices, we've gotten kind of the 2 early practices out of the way. I think we've now gotten more of a sense of what the running backs can do in this offense and what they're going to bring. I'm hesitant a little bit to just throw Keontae Ingram and Brandon Campbell, right at the top, only because there's such a familiarity with Stephen Carr and Vavae Malepeai where you feel like what they can do. And now when Ingram and Campbell come in, there's this newness of, oh, that's something to what? I mean, they have been that good. The other hand is what I just said. Ingram and Campbell they've been terrific. They've been really good early on. At this point, with what I've seen in terms of the full pads practice and how difficult Keontae Ingram is to bring down and how many extra yards he can create by himself, it would not surprise me if he ends up as the starter and getting maybe a bulk of the work this year, because what we know is important to Mike Jinks and Clay Helton and Graham Harrell, he can also produce in the passing game, and he is a good pass catcher.
Well, I think what's happened is from remarks by Jinks a couple of months ago, I want a back.
Mm-hmm.
Carry the ball or have touches. I dislike that term, touches. I don't think of a running back as his primary goal is to catch passes out of the backfield. I understand the air raid offense, but running backs, they want, I mean, do passers want to hand off all the time? No, they want to pass. And in this offense, they can do that. But running backs want to run the ball. Now, when I saw film of Ingram at Texas early in his, before he got hurt, he was really good. He was really good. Now, I know that Bijan Robinson was highly recruited by everybody. And when he got his opportunity at Texas, he shined, which was no shock. But that didn't mean that Ingram wasn't good. It's just this guy's maybe better. And Ingram, when he came back, he just couldn't get back into the rhythm of it because of his injuries. The question that's going to happen is, number one, Clay Helton said it Saturday morning. He says, we want our running back to get 23 to 25 carries. We want the backup to get somewhere between 13 and 15 carries. All right, so now he has basically said, this is going to be a change. We're not going to make everybody happy. But you know something? I don't know if I'm buying into that. And I'll tell you why. Because you got Stephen Carr and you've got Pavai, there. And those guys are good running backs. They're running behind a deficient offensive line. If you put both of those guys in a major, we can open up holes for you type of offensive line, I don't think there'd be any question about their ability, to be honest with you. Now, that being said, let's suppose by what you said, at the very best, that Ingram becomes the number one guy, right? Well, that's going to cause a ripple. I laughed, actually, when Helton was trying to sell on Saturday morning. They all root for each other. They all want each other to do so well. I've never been on a team where everybody wanted someone to do so well to the point where I'm not playing. Okay. I mean, if Ingram is the guy, he's got to demonstrate in the next 3 weeks and in fall training camp in August that he's so far better than the other two. Because one thing I know about Helton, and it's not a bad thing, it's just that he believes in the pecking order. And the pecking order is you got Carr and you have, Favai, who have been in that program for a long time. Okay. Is he going to throw them under the bus? I don't know. But I do know this, that Ingram is going to have to really show that even those two guys go, well, he is pretty good. I mean, okay, there's no argument here. Nobody knows better than the players. And the players know when coaches are playing favorites. And whatever your definition of a favorite is, he's got to really establish himself. Campbell, he's a freshman. They can kind of toy around with him. But I don't think Ingram came to SC with the idea that he's going to be sitting on the bench behind Carr, and Favai. It's not going to happen. So, and Jinx is, he recruited Ingram. So we'll see.
And that's what makes it so interesting, because there's no way that could be an easy decision if you go with Ingram. And I don't mean to discount what Stephen Carr and Vavai Malapaya have done this spring. Vavai had a big, long touchdown run on Saturday, and Stephen Carr has had a few flashes and looks good. Those are two really solid running backs that you can win games with. And there's no question about that. The Ingram thing is interesting because, like you said, I think all those things go together. We're looking for one lead back. You go out in the transfer portal where you could get guys kind of anyway. I mean, there's so many guys in the transfer portal. You could add any number of guys at any number of positions you want. They went and got a running back. And that's where you have maybe 4 on the roster and 2 seniors. They went and got an experienced guy who could play right away. Not, maybe a redshirt freshman or something like that, where you stash and you need them for next year or something like that. So those are 2 pretty strong statements, I think, for me. And the way Ingram has played it's been really impressive. Again, the no guarantees about the run game at this point and how much they're going to run and how well it's going to work. But just looking at kind of the way the running backs are playing, it's going to be a tough call to really settle on any of them. But if that's the plan, then that's going to be an interesting next 3 weeks again to watch.
Well, I
brings
think,
it to positions themselves to be that guy at the start of fall.
yeah, I think also we have to consider is that Carr and Fabai have had injury problems. And if those two guys went down, which is not inconceivable in a season that you could have two running backs, who would you be left with? You'd be left with,
Sure,
players that maybe aren't ready to step up into that role.
sure.
So my thing is, I totally get why Ingram is there, but I think the bonus is he's not just a body; he's a
Mhm,
player.
mhm.
Bigger question is can they find some way to get these guys holes to run through? Otherwise, it's a domino effect. It'll affect everything. Health, Keaton Slovis, the play calling. Well, I don't know if it's going to affect the play calling, but that's just my opinion. But
And I like talking about that, the holes. I like what Brandon Campbell brings to it. Uh he's not small. He's not a little guy, but he has a way to find holes and kind of squeak through them a little bit. And I think that is something that really helps him as a back. And then surprising quickness after that. Again, am I going to project that he's playing over those guys, the seniors and Ingram? Probably not at this point, but boy, there is some talent there, and I think that they could find a way to get him involved in this offense. Again, it goes back to then if you're so set up where hey, we only want one back, maybe two backs going at a time. How do you juggle that? How does that look going forward? I think though, that's not an answer I think that we're going to get in the spring. I think that's definitely going to be a fall camp answer and maybe even not until the opening game.
I agree.
One coach we heard from this week was defensive line coach Vic Soto this past week. And he talked about the defensive line and kind of how things are going. Uh, that's a line that loses Marlon Tuipulotu, who was such a big part. Just opening up your thoughts, kind of what we've seen and heard and what's going on up there on the defensive line that has caught your attention this past week.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I really think that Soto would like to see Brandon Peely step up. My impression is they believe he has ability, but he's not consistent in every play. So, as a former coach myself, that tells me he doesn't try hard all the time. That's just basically it. And but I think Tuli Peloto is going to be a great player. His personality is different than his brother. Marlon was quiet, but quite a leader, quite a tough guy inside, and Tuli is kind of like the extroverted Marlon, so to speak. Jay Toia, I think, is a real possibility. He's such a massive human being, and he has a lot of ability. The question coming out of high school was he too big? In other words, was his body not really shaped yet? And it may not be totally in shape yet, but he could be so dominant because he's a space eater, which would be good for linebacker. So I think that's the deal. Plus we've already discussed in the past about, the injuries of players who aren't out there right now, So I think the defensive line has a chance to be good. It's just a matter of who's playing where. I like the idea of, I like what Soto was preaching. Fall, we're hunters. We're hunting. We're going to find ball. Find ball, hit ball. I mean, he really takes it down to its absolute.
It's very animalistic. Yes.
Very
The
animalistic.
way he talks
I'm
about
all
it.
I'm all
Yes.
for that, and I'll tell you why. Because I'm so old at this point that I go back to the Wild Bunch, the original Wild Bunch, and I can tell you that's how they were when Marv Goo was coaching defensive lines. They were animalistic. I mean, they were just like, are these guys crazy, or are they just one step before going to San Quentin? And they were animals. I mean, anybody who says, well, the Wild Bunch, were they really that good? The younger people, I go, believe me, they were that good for their time period. They were that good. They walked the walk. And you look at some of Carroll's defense with Sean Cody and Mike Patterson, they were tough. So when I hear Soto preaching what he's preaching, some of these players are going to buy into it, really buy into it. And I think if they do, they'll have a pretty good defensive line.
And that's been my take from this last week is watching it. I'm trying to judge the defensive line against itself from practice to practice. And the first day in pads, are you better the next day in pads, and are you better after that? And that's kind of what I'm taking from it. It's not so much how did they look against the offensive line, because that's always so difficult to judge. Is that a good play or a bad play if you're a USC fan, if there's a long run or an interception or anything like that? But if you're getting better, and that's what it feels like the defensive line is doing right now, playing with more confidence and that kind of swagger that Soto talks about, and just playing like the offensive line isn't there. Run through them, run around them, do whatever, just impose your will across the board. And that's what you're starting to see again. Does that mean that they're doing this against Stanford and against Oregon and against, whoever in the fall? I don't think yet, but you're seeing kind of traces of it, maybe seeds being planted right now. Tuli Tuipulotu, he was great last year. He's raised his game up again. I think he's just a guy that you lock in there and you just see how many plays he can give you every single game. Jay Twyett in the middle, he became a different guy. The first week when they're playing without pads on and just kind of getting into it, once they put pads on, he is a different guy. His ability to kind of stuff the run and just cause chaos there in the middle, for a true freshman, that's impressive. Again, a long way to go, and you got to see, if he has the stamina to do it, and against some of the bigger guys. But that looks like a guy that has some staying power there in the middle, and maybe even kind of chipping in this year. Brandon Peely on Saturday, he goes down with a bit of an injury, but he started out, batting a pass down, and you can tell he's trying to live up to what Vic Soto is trying to set out for him. And I think it was interesting that he said that Coach Soto said, your eyes go to him as the guy who's got to step up, and putting that pressure, on a senior. Hey, we need you to do this. We need you to step up. And it feels like Peely's responded again. Hopefully, what we saw him go out of practice on Saturday isn't a lasting thing, because I do think USC really needs to get something out of him. I think what I've found interesting looking at the defensive line is how many guys are kind of moving around, and what they're doing with those guys. You see Dejon Benton, he's standing up. He's, kind of like an outside linebacker at this point, moving him around. Tuipulotu, he's dropping back in coverage. There's just guys moving all over, and it, not to get into the quarterbacks, but Miller Moss and Jackson Dart coming in as true freshmen early enrollees, and they're seeing, a 280-pound guy dropping back and, out covering a wide receiver. And it's like, well, where'd the other guy go? And then, there's nothing to do. So judging those guys kind of on a curve because of what we've seen from that defensive line, you have so many guys up there that fit now, I think, what Vic Soto and Todd Orlando have talked about with what they want from the defensive line, where it's like you can play 3 different spots along the front, maybe even 4 up there, and you can kind of create havoc by doing that. I think we've seen a big step from Jake Lichtenstein. He has been very good this spring. Jamar Sakona is a guy that all the coaches have talked about kind of coming in shape and really buying in, and he's there in the middle. And it feels like there are enough pieces. And this is where you're playing without Nick Figueroa this spring. What he did last year, if you kind of push that forward another year, that's another, potential big help up there on the front. So it's been, I think, positive. You just got Drake Jackson back. I know he's kind of outside linebacker, but that guy's, bringing a pass rush for your defensive line. And the one guy I want to point out is Hunter Echols has been really good this spring. He was filling in for Drake Jackson at that outside linebacker spot. Drake Jackson comes back, and you kind of say, okay, Drake, that's you go ahead and hop in there. Hunter Echols went back to the second team, and on Saturday, just he caused chaos for that second team offensive line. And so I think that's another guy where you start talking about that. And I know we're in spring ball right now, but you can't really talk about USC's defensive front without saying, oh, by the way, Corey Foreman is coming in the fall. So right now, again, I talked about kind of the seeds that you're seeing up front. Does this become kind of a dominant, Pac-12 defensive line? I don't know, but right now in spring, what you want to see is getting better every time out, and that's what it feels like is happening. And I think, talking about the position coach, I think USC found a very good one. in Vic Soto. He's a guy who talks the talk and then walks the walk. I think if he needed to go out there and put shoulder pads on, he could go through a full contact practice like nothing right now. So again,
I
a
think,
lot of answers so far in how are they going to show up. Now you've got questions: can they extend that, and can they keep going and improving over the next few weeks?
just a couple of quick comments. First thing that we have to look at on the defensive line is that they're technically sound with their hands. Before they do anything with anybody else, they have to know what they're doing. The second thing is, because SC doesn't, the style of ball they play on offense, okay, they're not seeing a Stanford type of offense. They're not seeing a Notre Dame type of offense. What I mean by that is they're seeing a weak offensive line. They're not seeing one that fires out and tests their manliness. And they don't see that. The only time they're going to see it is in the game. So that's one of my great fears, that they're not prepared just because they don't get to see it in practice. A couple other things was that it was interesting that Soto said in his interview that the thing with Brandon Peely says, I have to get him really pissed off. I have to, every practice, I got to find a way to get him really upset, because he plays great when he's upset. And the other one was about Jay Toia. Most people won't remember this name. I understand that, but for the old people like me, they'll get a kick out of it. He kind of reminds me of a bigger version of a guy named George Achika. George Achika was from the Bay Area, and he came in as a freshman. He was a consensus parade All-America, and he was a really tough player. And when I watched stuff on Toia, even when I saw him in high school, he played against my nephew's Corona Del Mar team at the time for the CIF title. He just reminds me of Achika. And for those who saw Achika, they would know what I mean. But Achika dominated inside as a nose tackle. And I think that this kid from Brethren Christian could do the same thing.
The point about Peely is well taken with Soto, and that's one of those things where the coaches have all talked about missing last spring. That's what they would have learned, right? They would have learned enough about those players. I know what this guy's buttons are. I know what he's capable of. I know him as a person and a player, and that's what they didn't have going into last fall. And that's where you hope the steps come, where the coaches now understand the players better. Players understand what the coaches want and what they're asking, and kind of, what makes everything go around and tick. And that's what you hope is coming out of this spring ball. Wrapping this up, I think through 2 weeks, there have been some positive signs. I don't think they're finished by any means, and you still have a bunch of questions on either side. But again, through 2 weeks, especially defensively, when we talk about kind of progress being made and what things look like, I think that there have definitely been some positive signs. I look forward to recapping week 3, where we're talking about, maybe the run game and offensive line again, and see how that's going. Because obviously those are going to be kind of the big questions as we move forward through the rest of spring ball.
Yeah, and remember, next Saturday, everybody can watch, be on the showcase on the Pac-12 network. So people can join in and say, well, that's what he looks like. We'll see.
And we'll hope that what we've talked about for the last couple of weeks kind of holds true for everybody.
Absolutely.